I'm not gonna bury the lead on this one. The revised One D&D Warlock in UA 7 freaking slaps. And it's been a long time coming. Months have passed since the Warlock's dismal showing from UA 5, but now it's back and with a ton of reworks. Some big and some small, but what it all adds up to is a class that truly feels like a step in the right direction. Something that we haven't seen all that much of in these playtests so far. Don't mistake that for me saying it's perfect, because it's not. Some things are still a little bit questionable, and others, well, maybe the team swung a little bit too hard. In any case though, I think it's really important to recognize the good and not just the bad. We'll get to all of it though, so join me for the next 10 minutes or so as we examine the newest Warlock revision from UA 7. Probably the most obvious change is the return to pact magic. This is something that was sorely missed by much of the community, including myself from the previous version of the class when they experimented with making the Warlock a half-caster. Everything about spell progression in this version is identical to what we had in the 2014 version of the class. Cantrips, spells prepared or known, spell slots, and slot levels have not received any adjustments, which I do think may have been a little bit of a missed opportunity. As happy as I am that pact magic has returned, and despite the addition of magical cunning, which we will get to shortly, I still can't help but feel like I would have liked to see the amount of spell slots increased by 1 across the board. Something like getting 3 at 6th level, 4 at 11th level, and 5 at 17th level maybe. I'll be honest though, this isn't really a make or break for me, as they have tried to compensate for it in other ways, which we'll get to a little bit later. But I do think that it would have been a nice quality of life improvement for many Warlock players, especially if we consider the fact that Jeremy Crawford has mentioned multiple times that the most feedback they received regarding the Warlock since 2014 is its lack of available spell slots. It led to many players simply never casting their spells since they held on to them waiting for just the right moment to cast them, since they didn't want to feel like they wasted such a precious resource. But maybe this might not actually be such a big deal after all, since the new reworked invocations can actually help alleviate this concern by quite a bit. To me, pact magic is so emblematic of what a Warlock is. They don't derive their abilities from study or inherently have them, they made a deal, and through that deal they have magical abilities bestowed upon them that function like no other. Losing pact magic in the previous UA really felt like a significant blow to the identity of the class, so I couldn't be more happy to see it make a return, even if I still think it might need some slight tuning. But hey, maybe I'm wrong about that, maybe it's just broken now. It's probably worth mentioning here that the unified spell list that existed in the 6 previous Unearthed Arcanas, the Arcane, Divine, and Primal lists, have been done away with and replaced with the individual class lists once again. I have some mixed feelings about that, but that's probably worthy of a video on its own, so I won't go into it here. Also, the Warlock spellcasting ability is now back to being Charisma rather than being determined by your pact as it was in UA 5. I'm a little bit disappointed to see that go. I thought it was such a cool piece of flavor, but here we are. In order to combat the spell slot woes that have plagued the Warlock for a decade now, the design team has created the new 2nd level feature, Magical Cunning. Now, as excited as I am that this feature exists, I find it hard not to feel like the execution leaves a lot to be desired. Magical Cunning allows a Warlock to perform a ritual that takes 1 minute to complete, to regain half of their spell slots rounded up, and you can only use it once per long rest. The scaling of this feature is not particularly great. It allows you to recover 1 spell slot at 2nd level and only 2 spell slots all the way up to level 19. Now, I'm not one to look a gift horse in the mouth. This is an improvement. It does give the Warlock slightly more staying power and grants some additional flexibility with their spellcasting, which is welcome to be sure. But why for the love of God did they need to include the stipulation that you have to have no pact magic spell slots remaining? I understand specifying that they're pact magic slots since they don't want to have unintended multiclassing implications, but I just cannot fathom why the design team thinks that requiring a player to have no more of a resource before they can recover it is a good thing. Now, admittedly, this is less egregious than the Bard Superior inspiration, which required the player to roll initiative, something that is almost entirely out of the player's control. This, at least, the Warlock player can have some agency in, but would it really have been so bad to just allow them to recover a spell slot even if they weren't fully tapped out? Honestly, I don't know. I've gone on this tirade before in so many videos, so I won't do it again here. Suffice it to say that while I can fully appreciate that resource management is a critical part of the game, I don't feel that it needs to be made so out of reach that the resources feel meaningless. I've actually made an entire video about this topic, so I'll link that in the description if you're interested. I'm currently trying to reach a stretch goal of 5,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so if you'd like to help support me on that journey, a sub to the channel would be incredibly appreciated. Thanks. Magical Cunning actually receives something of an upgrade all the way at 20th level, where it revives the old Eldritch Master feature. This capstone functions essentially identically to the 2014 version of the feature, which allows the character to regain all spell slots after completing the 1 minute ritual. While I think that this can definitely use a little bit of tweaking, we can at least all be thankful that Hexmaster is gone. The Contact Patron feature from UA 5 has returned, but now arrives at 9th level, but otherwise remains the same. Mystic Arcanum has returned to its rightful place as an 11th level class feature. It functions exactly as it did in the 2014 version with one addition. Now, whenever you gain a level in Warlock, you can replace one of your Arcanum spells with a Warlock spell of the same level. This is a welcome change that is consistent with many other spellcasting adjustments implemented to various classes over the years, allowing for replacing otherwise permanent spells at certain level breakpoints. I am a big fan of reverting Mystic Arcanum back to being a class feature rather than the invocation form that it was in UA5. The UA5 version almost made Mystic Arcanum feel like an invocation tax. Like, sure, you didn't have to take it, but not taking it almost felt as bad as not taking Eldritch Blast. With Mystic Arcanum moving back to being a class feature, it allows all Warlocks to potentially benefit from higher level spellcasting while not crowding out many of the other Eldritch invocations, many of which have also received some significant overhauls. Many of the Eldritch invocations that granted the ability to cast a spell without expending the use of a spell slot had their level requirement dramatically lowered. This has the added benefit of helping to alleviate the class's spell slot limitations. Master of Myriad Forms, for example, now only requires the character to be at 5th level rather than 15th, without any changes to the invocation itself. Something that's worth noting is that previously, many of the invocations that granted the ability to cast a spell without consuming a spell slot also removed the needing for material components, such as Ascendant Step. However, that does not seem to be the case anymore. Another huge change is the moving of the various pacts, Pact of the Chain, Tome, and Blade, to becoming invocations. This change allows you to potentially take all 3 packs if you really wanted to, and all of them have also had some really nice buffs included. Pact of the Blade now also grants you the use of the weapon's mastery property, and you can use your charisma modifier for attack rolls, much like the Hexblade used to be able to do. And you can select whether it deals necrotic, radiant, or psychic damage. Pact of the Chain, which requires you to have 2 levels in Warlock, now lets you cast Find Familiar as an action and without the use of a spell slot, rather than as a ritual, and has added a few additional forms that the Familiar can take. Pact of the Tome now, in addition to choosing 3 cantrips from any class list, now lets you also select 2 first level spells from any class list that have the ritual tag. As long as the book is on your person, these spells are always prepared. It also grants you an additional first level spell slot that can only be used once per long rest. A few other invocation changes that are worthy of note are Agonizing Blast. This no longer requires the use of Eldritch Blast. Now you can choose any Warlock cantrip that deals damage and add your spellcasting ability modifier to the spell's damage rolls. This change also applies to Eldritch Spear. Life Drinker is down to 9th level from 12th level and allows you to roll 1d6 additional damage rather than using your charisma modifier, and that damage can also be necrotic, psychic, or radiant. When you do this, you can also expend 1 hit dice to regain that many hit points plus your constitution modifier. Devil's Sight also finally works in dim light as well as darkness. I've lost count of the amount of times that I mentioned how ridiculous this omission was, and I'm unreasonably happy that it's finally been addressed. Lessons of the first ones now require 2nd level, but is repeatable, meaning that you can take a whole lot of first level feats. It's important to mention the distinction here that the feats selected must lack any prerequisites, including levels. Finally, Thirsting Blade, which requires you to have at least 5 levels in Warlock and have selected the Pact of the Blade invocation, grants you the extra attack feature. This grows to allowing 2 extra attacks at 11th level. This is an absolutely huge amount of potential power for a class that also has spell access. It's possible that it might be too good, but that's not really my area of expertise. I'll leave that to Chris from Treant Monk's Temple or Colby from D4. Overall, the changes to invocations are significant. Not only do you gain access to 10 across your career as a Warlock rather than 8 from 2014 or 9 from UA5, you also get access to them right away from first level. And the massive level reduction in so many of them really does go a long way to offsetting the spell slot concerns, not to mention the additional first level slot available from Pact of the Tome. Speaking of which, I really like the move to having pacts be included as invocations. They allow for so much more flexibility in really defining your character and opens up more potential combinations as you level up, since you can potentially take multiple or even no pacts if you wanted to. Moving to the subclasses, while all of them have received some really nice improvements, I really only want to focus on the Archfey right now because it went from, in my opinion at least, one of the most mundane and uninteresting subclasses to what is surely about to be one of the most exciting in the game. Just like in UA5, the extended spell list has been removed and replaced with the Patron Spells feature, which gives you certain spells that you always have prepared at certain levels. This was a really nice quality of life change that I'm glad to see stuck around. 3rd level grants a new feature, Steps of the Fae. This feature allows you to cast Misty Step, one of the most fun and massively underrated spells in the game, a number of times equal to your charisma modifier without the use of a spell slot per long rest. That on its own is huge, but it keeps going. In addition, you can choose one of the following effects. Refreshing Step, which allows you, when you teleport, to grant 1d10 temporary hit points to a creature that you can see within 10 feet of you. Based on the wording here, you don't actually have a choice, you kind of have to use it. If it allows you to select yourself, then it's not a problem, but since it seemingly forces you to grant the temporary hit points, you may potentially need to select an enemy. I highly doubt that this is the intent though. Some wording clarification would be very helpful here. Alternatively, you can choose Taunting Step. This has creatures within 5 feet of the space that you left make a wisdom saving throw, causing them disadvantage on attack rolls against creatures other than you on a failed save. 6th level grants Misty Escape, which gives additional choices to the steps of the Fade feature, but also allows you to cast Misty Step as a reaction in response to taking damage. The additional choices are Disappearing Step, which grants you the invisible condition until the start of your next turn, or until immediately after you make an attack roll or cast a spell, and Dreadful Step, which has creatures within 5 feet of the space that you left or landed in, you choose, make a Wisdom saving throw, taking 2d10 psychic damage on a failed save. The 10th level feature, Beguiling Defenses, retains the immunity to the charmed condition, but does away with the counter charm aspect. Instead, immediately after you were hit by a creature you can see with an attack roll, you can use your reaction to reduce the damage by half and force the attacker to make a Wisdom saving throw. If they fail, they take psychic damage equal to the damage that you took. You can use this once per long rest. Finally, the 14th level feature, Bewitching Magic, allows you to cast Misty Step as part of the same action that you use when you cast a spell of the enchantment or illusion schools, and without the use of a spell slot for it. The revised Archfey subclass just seems so ridiculously fun. Bouncing around using Misty Step, healing allies, and damaging enemies just seems like such a unique way to play, and I can't wait to try it. It brings so much battlefield control and utility just through incredible maneuverability. I think the UA7 Warlock is about as close to perfect as we've had so far during the entire One D&D playtest process. Like I said at the beginning, there are still certainly some questions that need to be asked and answered. Are there enough spell slots? Is Thirsting Blade too powerful? Can or should Magical Cunning be tweaked a little bit more to provide some additional flexibility? These are questions among many others that I don't know the answers to right now, but I'm sure time and the community will tell. I love the changes to the invocations. They seem far more relevant than ever before, and lowering the level requirement on them really helps to alleviate the spellcasting concerns, albeit through a bit of an indirect manner. I'm ultimately left with an incredibly different impression after reading this iteration of the Warlock than it was from reading the UA5 version. While it's certainly not revolutionary in any way, I think it's the evolution that the class absolutely needed. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to help me reach my goal of 5,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Check out some of my other One D&D content, but otherwise, take care.